Hey guys, welcome to the Massive Iron Channel. I'm Steve Shaw. In this video, I have the pleasure of talking with Stan Efferding. Stan is, I've been in the industry a long time. Stan's one of the few people I have never run across, so it's a pleasure to have you on my channel. Stan, welcome to Massive Iron. And for those of you, for the 5 people that don't know who you are, can you introduce yourself and give us a little background?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Stan Efferding, IFBB Pro, world record powerlifter, skinny guy in college, wanted to get big. So I've spent 30 years of my life kind of as a hobby competing, built a number of successes. And now I'm in the fitness industry full time, of course, with my vertical diet and working with athletes. And so I'm loving it. This is probably the best. Now I'm almost 52 now. Probably for the first time in my life, I'm doing something as a career that I really enjoy.
Yeah, so don't get controversial and tell people you were skinny in college, because I will as well, and that will that'll smash the stereotype that we're both genetic elites. Stan, I was watching a video of yours, and it really resonated. You were talking about why Westside is so successful. Basically, you have savage men in a savage environment, and that's something that I made a video about because I really connected with it. I wanted to talk to you about it. How important is it for the average lifter to find that place in their training where, where they can just go savage, or find that savage lane to really improve their results?
Well, I mean, it's absolutely essential at one point. If you want to be really successful, if you want to compete at a top level, you're going to have to continue to push yourself further than you've pushed yourself before. You have to continue to take the body somewhere it hasn't been before. Particularly in this sport, the adaptation requires that you find a stimulus that exceeds any prior stimulus, or you're just going to be in maintenance mode. And that's fine for people that are exercising, but for people that are training to get better, to compete, to win, then you're absolutely going to have to dig more out of yourself. That's essential.
Let's backtrack a little bit. I'm not sure what your history is with lifting. I started lifting in '86, but when was the flip switched for you? I mean, when did you first start lifting, and when did you really find that next level in your training?
Well, when I got to college, again, I was a skinny kid. I couldn't bench 135. I had to take the 45-pound plates off and put the 35s on. That was quite embarrassing, standing around all the fraternity guys at the gym. It was the macho moment that I failed miserably at. So I just dove into it. I started reading everything I could. At the time, there wasn't very many resources. There was the guy behind the desk at Gold's Gym, of course, and he was preparing for a bodybuilding show and eating tuna and chicken breast and rice cakes. So you can just see how horrible the information was. Now we have the internet. I don't think we appreciate just how much information we have at our fingertips. But back then, you make a lot of mistakes. So I dove in, and initially I started eating that bodybuilder diet, tuna and rice cakes. And I started training 6 days a week, 2 hours a day, thinking I grew in the gym. Using Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia Bodybuilding to dictate my training methods. And, probably for better part of 2 years, I didn't put on much. I was 140 pounds when I started. I competed in my first show at 158. So I didn't make a lot of gains, but I was sore all the time, and I trained a lot. And, I wrote an article recently for, well, it wasn't too recently, but it was for the NPC News called what was the name of that article? It wasn't 90. Oh, you don't grow in the gym was my article, because I learned after about 2 years of competing, and I competed in that bodybuilding show. A local gym owner that was the promoter of the show said, "Look, you need to flip the script on that. You need to start eating more and actually training less." And at the time, it was really counterintuitive. And so once I started figuring out that you don't grow in the gym, and you grow outside the gym with sleeping and eating, then I started gaining more size more quickly, getting stronger. And that was kind of when it became more rewarding, and I felt like this is something I wanted to do competitively long term.
Now let's talk about strength training in specific. There's a lot of guys that come to me. They want to get stronger, but there's a certain point where everybody seems to be stagnating, and just not pushing themselves to the point where they're able to reach their goals. What advice do you have for the average lifter out there who is just kind of, in that stage where they've built some strength, they really want to take it to the next level, but they're really uncertain how to take it to the next level?
What I discovered purely by accident has really proven to be, I think, the most scientifically verified method, and that's you need to have some sort of periodization. You need to cycle your training. You can't try lifting heavy all the time, doing the same basic movements. Even Eddie Cohn only competed in powerlifting twice a year, and in between those two shows, he did hypertrophy training. You talk to guys like Mikhail Koklayev, and you listen to a seminar with Boris Shako, and they talk about how they create 5-year plans and they cycle their training, and they'll lift progressively heavy for a while, and then they'll go through a different phase of training, such as the hypertrophy training. I did it purely by accident because I was competing in bodybuilding and lifting heavy. And so I would diet down for a bodybuilding show and do some more repetitions and sets and variations of exercises. And then I would get back into heavy lifting, and I would do, less frequency, less variation, more weights, longer rest periods. And so I was cycling my body that way. I think that some bodybuilders recognize that as kind of like the rebound. And they diet down real hard for a show and get down to 5% body fat. And then they go back to eating a ton of food, and they rebound or slingshot their way back up to probably 10 pounds heavier than they were when they started dieting for the show. A similar kind of thing, I think, should be utilized for powerlifting. I'm kind of going back and forth here, but the question was with respect to getting stronger and competing at another level. And a lot of guys, they'll eat up to a certain level and train real heavy, and then they'll kind of reach a plateau. It's the same thing that happened to Brian Shaw, or Hafthor Bjornsson, actually, when he reached out to me 3 years ago. He said he was getting fatter and not stronger. And he had gotten himself up to 435 pounds and kind of plateaued there. Now, I don't mean to overcomplicate the things, but when I dug into what was going on with him, he had experienced some metabolic syndrome. He had some fatty liver disease, which is typical when you gain a lot of central adiposity. Had some blood sugar resistance issues, insulin resistance, little elevated blood pressure, and the kinds of things that start partitioning nutrients towards fat and not towards muscle. And so I took some weight off of him. I took 40 pounds off of him. And this is the diet down, slingshot back up method that I was just describing. Initially, I had to get him healthy so that he could respond to the training better. He was just lifting heavy all the time, staying heavy all the time. I bulked myself up from 140 pounds to over 300 pounds in 10 years. And throughout my career, I came down to 230, 240 at 4% to compete in bodybuilding. And then I bulked back up to 300 to compete in powerlifting. And my proposal is that was beneficial, that when I brought Thor down and he got insulin sensitive and we fixed his insulin resistance and got his blood pressure down and his blood sugars down, then when I built him back up, he slingshot back up to 450 pounds and gained a significant amount of strength. But he had to have been willing to take that one step back in order to take 2 steps forward. So it's kind of a long, convoluted explanation to say to people who have plateau, maybe you're just, you have to give your body an opportunity, a different stimulus, and get it sensitive again to respond and repair from that stimulus by taking that step back and then 2 steps forward. And you don't have to stay heavy all year long.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I was just actually speaking to a client of mine, a very strong guy. He benches like 430, and he wanted a program, and he's going full speed all the time, heavy, heavy, heavy. And I tried to put him on an off-season program, and he says to me, "That's like a bodybuilding program." And I'm like, at some point, you need to increase your work capacity and do a little bit more volume. A little background on me: I didn't even know what powerlifting was for 21 years. I just did, what is kind of considered power building, just getting strong with volume. And here we are in the modern landscape, Stan, where everybody seems to be seems to be moving towards a lot of low rep sets and maxing out every single day. How important is it for that person just to take a step back and do a little bit more volume and maybe train more like a bodybuilder for hypertrophy in the off season?
Hugely important. I don't think that that you can continue to push yourself heavy all the time. You're going to suffer from injuries. Of course, if you're putting on any significant amount of body fat and central adiposity in particular, then your insulin resistance is going to start to take over, and you're just not going to partition nutrients into muscle. So I think it's hugely important. To be honest with you, I think that we just kind of get stuck doing what we always have done. We as power lifters, if I'm going to describe myself as in that realm right now, there's nothing worse than getting weaker. And what you have to realize is that's a very short-term thing that gives you a long-term benefit. When I dieted down for bodybuilding, I struggled benching 400 pounds. And I would bulk back up over a 6 or 7 week period and get damn near 600. So if you're just confident that what you're doing is going to pay off in the long term, this is the way the Russians train. This is the way that Boris Shako has trained his Olympic athletes. Dmitry Klokov, one of the greatest Olympic weightlifters, you know, he in the off season he would do a ton of cardio. It just creates more health. You are able to recover better when your cardiovascular is better. So when you go back into powerlifting and you start cutting down on volume and you start increasing rest periods, you have this carryover effect from the cardiovascular fitness that you achieve during that higher volume bodybuilding. What do we want to call that? Block, if you want. Mesocycle, however it's described today. That's going to carry over and help you to recover faster. And then your insulin sensitivity is also now going to help partition nutrients into building muscle. So when I won my pro card, I weighed about 250 pounds, training with Flex Wheeler. I didn't do a single squat, deadlift, or bench press for over 3 months. And Flex wanted me to do hypertrophy training stuff, incline dumbbell presses, a lot of leg press and hack squats and lunges. We didn't do any deadlifts. I had to be cautious of how much stress, central nervous system stress I put on my lumbar spine, because it would create more delayed onset muscle soreness. I wouldn't recover fast enough to do as much frequency and volume as was necessary for bodybuilding. So we were training every body part twice a week with more sets and shorter rest periods. And so I stayed away from those lifts. I won my pro card. I flew back to Sacramento and I moved into an extended stay and I started training with Mark Bell. And in 7 weeks, I had gone from 250 to 285, struggling with 400-pound squat my first day, I still remember, to squatting 821 pounds on the platform 7 weeks later. So it's definitely worth the step back and the 2 steps forward.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that, Stan. That's some really wonderful information. I got one more question for you. I appreciate you having on. I get hammered with a lot of questions about the vertical diet, and I know enough about it to to speak semi-intelligently. But since we have you on the channel, could you give a little basics for those of you that are interested, in the vertical diet and where they can find out more information?
Yeah, the vertical diet is just what I discovered from over-restrictive eating when I was dieting down for bodybuilding shows. I became weaker and smaller as a result. And I discovered when I was eating in calorie excess for powerlifting that sometimes I would get overly fat and experience metabolic syndrome. And what I found is there's certain foods, an array of foods that you shouldn't exclude. In the bodybuilding, figure, physique, and bikini industry, it's common to exclude red meat, to exclude dairy, to exclude fruit, to not salt your food. All of those things can be critical for your health, the micronutrient density of those foods. And so on the other end of the spectrum with the powerlifters and strongman, they tend to just do a free-for-all, eating pizza, pasta, and pancakes, and end up really quickly accumulating insulin resistance and then topping out, as we've just discussed. So I created a diet that I felt worked on both ends of the spectrum by getting the micronutrients first, building a foundation upon which I could add any number of calories necessary, or whether you were dieting or bulking. And it's intended to be healthy. It's intended to use the most bioavailable, highly micronutrient dense, easy to absorb foods. It's a low FODMAP diet plan, so you're not all gassy and bloaty, and you don't and you can absorb all your micronutrients. It's good for digestion. It's very nutrient dense. I use ruminants such as red meat instead of chicken because it's higher in iron and B12 and really easy to digest. I use low gas vegetables as opposed to cruciferous like broccoli and cauliflower, which impedes iodine absorption and can cause lots of gas and bloating. I'll use low gas vegetables, spinach, carrots, root tubers. I make sure and get adequate potassium. I make sure and get adequate sodium. I make sure and get adequate iodine. All the things that are necessary for athletes to thrive, whether dieting or trying to gain weight. And so it's really not much different than what Vince Gironda was proposing back in the 60s. It's a shame that we didn't learn anything from that, and that there's been this chasm of poor nutrition information on both ends of the spectrum with the over restriction. You've got women that are their hair's falling out and their thyroid function is crashing, and they're having these horrible rebounds from competitions with edema and nutrient deficiencies, B12, anemia, amenorrhea. It's sad to see that happen. And someone like you and I have been around as long as we have and watched that happen. And I've trained hundreds and hundreds, now thousands of people over the years. And it's tragic to me that the industry is still promoting that kind of diet that's ruining these bodies, particularly women. And then the health problems for the men that are gaining weight, the issues with high blood pressure and high blood sugars and high cholesterol, and creating long-term damage potentially. So the vertical diet, in short, is really intended to be simple, sensible, sustainable, so that you can be healthy, so that the byproduct of that is great performance. And that's, I've used it for many, many years with my clients. I just more recently, about 18 months ago, I launched it as an actual product and made it into an ebook, because people were asking me, how do I feed my clients and why? Whether I'm training a Nadia Wyatt, who took third in the Miss Olympia figure, or Hafthor Bjornsson for World's Strongest Man. I use the same foundation of highly bioavailable, nutrient-dense, easy-to-digest foods and make sure they get all their micronutrients. And then their performance is just really a byproduct of that. So that's the intention with the vertical diet. It isn't intended to, I have people on the vertical diet that are doing keto. I have people on the vertical diet that are vegetarians. I'm not a zealot about any of that. I just try and make sure that they get everything that they need. You give the body what it needs, and it'll give you what you want so that they can perform better. So that's kind of in general terms what it's about. I take a deeper dive on my 2-hour video in Iceland that's got over 3 million views now. And of course, the ebook has been hugely popular and gone worldwide. And it's not just for athletes. We have an extraordinary number of ordinary folks, dad bods and soccer moms, that have improved their health, their blood pressure, blood sugars, body weight, cholesterol, all of those things. So it's just intended to try and help people improve their general health, and performance is really a kind of just a great byproduct of that.
Well, Stan, you probably don't know my story because I'm just a little fish in a big pond, but I got up to 346. I was near a 2,000 pound raw total, and fatty liver disease nearly killed me. So what you're talking about, hits home. I lost 100 pounds and I came back with my strongest meat ever. So for those of you that doubt the importance of what you're saying, all they need to do is take a look at my story. Stan, what's your website, and where can people find out more information about the vertical diet, and where can they connect with you on social media?
Everything's at Stan Efferding. StanEfferding.com is my website. My Instagram is @StanEfferding. My YouTube is Stan Efferding, and you can find me there.
All right, Stan, I appreciate you having you on. And if anybody has any questions or comments, they can drop them down below in the comment section. Again, thanks for joining me on Massive Iron, and have a great day.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.